Yeah?
Yeah.
So my number 2 is Middle-earth: Shadows of Mordor. On Xbox One, I've played all but the very, very, very final level, I believe, of this. So I've basically completed it. It is a open world combination of Batman, very, very, very much Batman, Arkham games, and Assassin's Creed, set in Mordor, in Middle-earth. You play as this chap called Talion, who's a ranger, same type of deal. By the way, before I continue, if I'm wrong about any of these Lord of the Rings-based facts, I apologise. I don't hate Lord of the Rings by any stretch. I actually quite like the films, and I read the books when I was young, but I'm very forgetful, so I apologise. A ranger, same type of person, I believe, as Aragorn, Viggo Mortensen, and I also believe Sean Bean from the films. Might be wrong, but he certainly looks like him. He is killed in an opening cutscene, along with his wife and child, by the Black Hand of Sauron. He is then resurrected by a wraith, who then you also play as this wraith at the same time, which was basically the developers' way of giving themselves carte blanche to any power, anything that they ever want to do. It's just that, oh yeah, the wraith can do that. Right. I've got no problem with that. It's a video game, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. You can jump off a 20-foot building and just land on your feet. Oh, wraith power. It's fine. That's absolutely fine. In fact, it's quite good. The game itself, it's absolute basic level. Like I said, it is Batman meets Assassin's Creed. The combat is Batman combat. Now, we say that quite a lot, but if I was told this is actually a tech share, I wouldn't be surprised. It is exactly the same rhythm, the same types of counters, but this is all swordplay, of course. The same buttons for the executions once you get your combo up to a certain level. But like Batman, it is fantastic, because every other game that tries to copy Batman's combat just fucks it up, basically. They don't get the idea that it's supposed to be done in a rhythm. They're just the gaps that you can traverse between enemies, all that sort of stuff. This, however, gets it bang on, and because the fact you've got a sword, you're hacking up orcs and uruks, the big old orcs, to pieces, and it's extremely gratifying if you like that type of thing, which I do. So kudos there straight away. The Assassin's Creed stuff, the game allows you to be stealthy along with hacky, but rarely enforces either, which is good. I think it's actually a much smoother and less fussy version of Assassin's Creed's movement, basically climbing up buildings. Again, you can kind of just sort of shoot up the side of a building and grab onto a thing without too much fuss. Wraith power, no problem. That's why you can jump that high. So you can climbing across little ledges and shit, jumping down on baddies. Very Assassin's Creed, but like I said, a less fussy version of Assassin's Creed. What's most interesting about the game, though, so you can imagine open world, bunch of side missions, some of which are leveling up your weapons, story missions, obviously, standard stuff in what is quite a small open world. But the reason it's small is because it's very dense, and it's populated by Sauron's army, the orcs and uruks, who they have this kind of hierarchy to them, and the game calls it a nemesis system. And I remember hearing this when the game was announced and paying zero attention to it, as you tend to do when anybody announces something with a name. But this is actually by far the most interesting thing about this game, and just a really, really super cool system, and the thing that makes the game as good as it is. And I should say, this is a very, very good video game. Basically, all the orcs that are strolling about, there's a bunch of them who are higher ranked, called captains, and there are higher level captains, and then level beyond that, and then war chiefs. There's 5 war chiefs. There's 2 kind of open world maps in the game, and there's 5 per open world map. But let's just kind of go back to that beginning bit. So you'll be, say, you'll first come across a captain. You'll be having a scrap with a bunch of orcs. You can get piled on by loads and loads and loads and loads. And then you'll suddenly hear, "Ranger!" and some guy will turn up, and it'll this cutscene of a real fierce-looking orc with a funny name at the bottom, like Haruk the Spitter or something like that, and he'd be like, "I thought I saw you, Rachel. I'm gonna cut you up proper." And then you get into a scrap with this guy, and he's like got an energy bar, which none of the others do, and it's a proper fight, and already you're kind of into it. If you manage to beat him and get the chance to kill him, he'll fall down, he'll be crossed out, and then it will go to a screen called the Battle Report, which is a bunch of, like, at first silhouettes of different orcs in the different positions within the army's hierarchy. And he'll be revealed, and he'll be cut down, and he'll fall down, and maybe someone else will be promoted into his place, or it might just stay there. And then you can be moving about, and suddenly that same guy will appear again, and he'll be like, "Ranger, last time you gave me this scar, but I won't let it happen again." And it'll be the same guy, and he's got this big scar down his face and like a metal plate where you've hurt him before, and you have another fight with him, and you get into these like long, drawn-out battles throughout the course of the game with different orcs. And it just has this level of personality and depth that no standard combat in this type of game could ever possibly have. And there's so much more to it than that you could start grabbing certain weaker orcs and basically interrogating them like you do in Batman, when you grab them and make them talk. You can do that in this as well. And that will give you intel on some of the other captains, so you can find out where they are on the map. And eventually you're trying to locate the war chiefs, so you need to get intel of where the captains are to be able to do that. And you can do any of this in any order. It's kind of like Crackdown in that respect. And it's just such a brilliant system, and it creates these amazing long drawn out battles between you and these orcs. And then something like you might just get chopped down by some chump orc in battle, but then he'll get promoted and he becomes a captain, and then his own path might take him all the way out to being a war chief through, because they start battling each other in the game as well. So that you'll have missions on the map where two orcs are dueling for power and stuff. It's just, honestly, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant system. It's brilliantly implemented. It's very, very cool. I'd like to see it approximated in other games. It's just fucking cool. It's one of the coolest things I've seen in this type of game for ages. And the whole game is just really strong. I mean, the reviews came out and they're really good, and I've absolutely loved pretty much every minute that I've had with the game. There's a couple of small duffy bits throughout the story in terms of there's like a sort of boss fight against the big monster, which is a bit shit, but niggly stuff. For the most part, it goes between being a strong, almost like a throwback game in some ways, because it's almost like a PS2 era action game. It's happy to be a game. It's not trying to be a movie or anything like that. Everything you do, all the side quests that you do are in service of the game. Like side quests will power up your weapon. So like Far Cry in that respect. It's not just stuff for the sake of stuff. Everything's in service of this game. But that Nemesis system and the personality of these orcs, and they're all rendered like their names are generated. It's just great. A really, really strong game, kind of out of nowhere, really. I mean, obviously it had been announced and had a degree of hype. But I must address 2 articles that I read today. I have to, because both of them got me fired up. 2 of the most ridiculous articles I've read in so long, and I've been ignoring a lot of ridiculous stuff over the last few months, but this is just daftness. Both from the same media source, basically. One was on Polygon and one was on The Verge, which, as far as I'm concerned, are the same thing. Yeah. The one on Polygon was about, at the beginning of this game, the very, very beginning, there's a tutorial where you're asked to sneak up behind your wife and press X to give her a kiss. It's the same thing that you use to sneak up behind a baddie and stab them. I was like, that's cute. That was the entire emotional response I had to that. That was it, literally that. There is a 1,000 to 1,500 word article by a chap called Zach Gage, a game designer. He made Spelltown, I believe, and other things. Dedicated to what a huge misstep this moment is, how it's completely out of place, how it ties into women as learning objects and things. I mean, a maddening, ridiculous piece of prose, born from the mind of I can only assume is a madman. And
yeah.
Just, I was kind of beggar's belief when I was reading it. But I will say one thing about this absolute horseshit that I read. I will say, at least he backed it up. as ridiculous as his argument is, he backed it up with kind of how he would have done it, why it was problematic for design. And I was like, this is madness, but I kind of believe you actually believe it, if that makes any sense. As horseshit as this is, and as melodramatic as it is, I'm going to let you off a little bit because you've kind of backed it up enough where I think, okay, you're just maybe a bit of a nutter. And even though this is obviously just a load of rubbish, I don't know, it's like maybe it did irk you to the point where you felt you needed to write into Polygon and ask them if you could write an entire article about it. Maybe it did. The other article, though, was on The Verge by one of Polygon's writer, Chris Plant, I think his name is, about how this game... fucking hell. This game is a morally repulsive video game. Okay. So it goes into basically like one of the things you can do in this game is like torture the bad guys, but it's hugely graphic in what you do. You basically sort of grab them, and later on in the game, you get to the point where you can start controlling the bad guys. And there's a twist in the second half of the game where you can start controlling orcs and even captains and sending them to betray. And you basically start bending. I mean, it's one of the back of the box quotes: bend Mordor to your will. So you start doing that. He has taken this to an extreme of extremes, calling the game morally repulsive, but I still had to play. It's a shocking game. I mean, honestly, it's a bloke hitting orcs, right? That is what this game is. It's a bloke hitting orcs. I'm all for reading into things. I'm all for critical analysis. I'm all for semiotics, even. But this is a bloke hitting orcs, and it's very good at being a bloke hitting orcs. He starts talking about, and isn't it problematic that this white dude is just hacking through this like minority? And it's like, stop it! Stop reaching for things that aren't there. Yeah. It drove me mad to the point of all I could think of is like, you're a person who has completely forgotten how to be a person. I don't believe for a second that the reaction you're pretending to have in this article is your real reaction. And if you have that little to worry about in this world, that this video game about a fucking Lord of the Rings man hacking up Lord of the Rings baddies, that's how it affects you, that much. And on to top it all off, because I must admit, when you start bending everyone to your will, you start to feel a little bit sorry for the orcs. Isn't Lord of the Rings, and I don't know much about Lord of the Rings, really. I have seen all the films a couple of times, and like I said, read the book. But isn't the whole basic concept of Lord of the Rings absolute power corrupts absolutely? Isn't that what Lord of the Rings is all about? Fundamentally, the one ring to rule the rule that corrupts you? And that's the thing that this game's making you feel? How dare you, writer? How dare you? He says, I think the developers stumbled across something that they couldn't really quite work out how to explain, in that they stumbled across this complicated thing. It's like, oh, you think you're better? You think these amazing people in Monolith Productions who made this amazing game and crafted this Nemesis system and developed this world that's believable and created all these gameplay systems, wrote a script that's actually quite entertaining and a story. You think that you, sitting there, scribbling your little story, have thought about all of this stuff and none of that's crossed their mind? They haven't thought about any of this stuff, any of it at all? Fuck you.